Need Bitcoin support? The pros at Coinbase Connect are here to help. Learn about self-custody, privacy, mining, lightning payments, and much more. Simply go to coinbase.com/connect and schedule a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin pro. Take your knowledge to the next level by connecting with a pro on coinbase.com today. Please check out episode 41 with Adam O, aka Denver Bitcoin on Twitter, episode 46 with Hodl Tarantula, or episode 49 with Adam Meister. All are pros you can connect with at coinbase.com connect today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Chris Alemo, and I am an amateur investor. This podcast is my open source journal of everything I learn about investing and wealth management. I'm here to explore the key concepts, market dynamics, and investing strategies that will assist you on the path towards financial independence and financial literacy. My mission is to build us from amateurs to experts. All suggestions are my own, and I recommend that you should do your own research before taking any investment advice. See you in this week's episode. I hope you enjoy. All right. How's it going, everyone? This is episode 50. Can't believe it's been 50 episodes of the Amateur Investors. This week, I got another guest. I have the founder of Hold Bitcoin, Caleb, here. Caleb's company, Hold Bitcoin's mission is simple. They believe that Bitcoin is the best money that mankind has ever created, and that we have a responsibility to spread that conviction to the rest of the world. In doing so, we're striving to become the catalyst through which mankind steps into a better future. They have 3 easy steps for getting into Bitcoin. That includes intrigue, learning, conviction, and their goal is to get everyone in the world to the conviction stage. Caleb, thanks for coming on the show. How have you been?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the awesome introduction.
Of course. I love your website. I think it's really clean design. I like the steps that you have and make it easy. By no means is Bitcoin's journey an easy one for anyone or just learning about it. It's long and arduous, but I think you help make it simpler and you simplify it, which is something that's a complex, abstract idea. It's something that's needed at times.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that, first of all. And I try, I don't know, I guess classifying Hold Bitcoin as a company, it's more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's more like intimidating. How's that? It's more intimidating than I think I want, that I want. The idea of Hold Bitcoin is strictly to be an open source location for people to get curated Bitcoin knowledge. And we're pretty unapologetically Bitcoin maximalists, that's for sure. And I saw that you have had quite a few Bitcoin guys on, like John Vallis, who's pretty legendary in the space and stuff. So, I hope that we can touch on some points that maybe some of your audience hasn't heard yet, but that's but you nailed it with the intro. We're really about doing our part as individuals to just have honest conversations about what Bitcoin really is. Of course, I got into it because the same reason everybody else gets into it, and that's because we want to be rich. Like you see that number, and you look back into that 2009 when it's $1 or whatever, and you're like, you see it today at 50 something thousand, and it's just like, is this potential still here? And that's part of that intrigue stage, I think, anyway. And what we're trying to do is move beyond that, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the space, you always hear NGU or number go up technology. That's definitely what intrigues most people. And I will say it is an enticing attribute for sure. If it was only going down, I think Jamie Dimon, what he said today, saying Bitcoin's worthless, or yesterday, I think that would hold true, and a lot of people would agree with that sentiment. Some people still agree with that sentiment, but it's kind of hard to do that. And I had a tweet today making fun of JP Morgan. It said, I was basically comparing them. It's like, oh, he calls it worthless, but it's twice the market cap of Jamie Dimon, basically his company, JP Morgan. It's twice the market cap of that. So if Bitcoin's worthless, is, JP Morgan, is it half worthless or whatever that means? Right. And then I followed it up with, I was like, remember, JP Morgan had a head start. In 2008, they got a $25 billion bailout. I said in 2009, Bitcoin was created and worth fractions of a penny. So It just kind of shows, going from one extreme to the other. Definitely JP Morgan, all the marbles were in their basket, and they definitely had the first mover advantage, or the longtime legacy name at least.
Right. Yeah. You know, and that sentiment, the idea that Bitcoin is worthless is truly a worthless statement. It's lazy. It doesn't make any sense. You know, I thought a lot about this, the term the term worthless, and there are actually very few things in this world that are worthless. I mean, for instance, if you go out and you dig a hole in the ground, your time to put in that you put into digging that hole has value as long as you've done it in the right spot, you know, or for the right reasons, or even the dirt that you threw out of the hole can have value, maybe to grow something in it. I mean, there garbage is another example. I guess you can like where I went to school in Ames, Iowa, they actually burn all of their trash and convert it into energy. I mean, there's just so many things that in this world that you would think are worthless, but they're not. And the beauty of Bitcoin in particular is we don't have to stretch like dirt or garbage. The value of Bitcoin is it is a freedom tool. It is an unstoppable way for human beings to communicate value. And that is the fundamental value. You know, I used to get on Twitter a lot more than I do, but when I get on Twitter, I always get so fired up and I should just unfollow him. But Steve Hanke drives me crazy
I
because
think most Bitcoiners are going same with the stuff that he says.
yeah, because he just regurgitates the same meaningless argument where it's like Bitcoin is it has a fundamental value of zero. You know, it can never be used as a what is the term he uses? It's like
Medium of exchange or no?
a unit of account. A unit of account. It's like how can something with an already determined supply schedule not be a unit of account, if not the best unit of account? Because I can tell you exactly how much Bitcoin is going to exist in 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, but you can't do the same for a dollar. We don't know what's going to happen with a dollar. In fact, you know, in the United States Senate, we just increased the debt ceiling. I mean,
did that go through? I know I've been tracking it, but I didn't see it. What a temporary increase through December?
I guess I haven't been either. So I saw in an email, I get the Robinhood like weekly recap, and I saw that they had passed it, and so I don't know if it's temporary through December or not.
I believe that they capped it just temporarily through December, which really just means they raised it and they're going to further raise it in December after they come out of recess.
Yeah, and you know, I heard a great perspective on what the whole raising of a debt ceiling is. You know, all of us, every single person in the United States, we know that the government's not going to choose just outright to default on their debt. First of all, it's not in their best interest. They're not going to get reelected if basically they just implode the government. But it's really just a way for them for a money grab. I mean, they can just keep getting people will lobby, and you know, it's all sort of the way that the incentives are all set up. But it's the same old story. You know, we know that this is going to continue to happen, and it's the corruption of fiat currency. You know.
Definitely, I agree. And I liked what you said about Iowa. I didn't know if you know this, but my day job is working for a waste to energy company. So quite literally,
Really?
that's my fiat job, is working as a waste to energy engineer by trade. I'm doing more procurement now. But we burn garbage, create electricity. We don't own a plant in Iowa, so that might be one of our competitors, or I guess, I don't know if it's a solo company. A lot of single municipalities will just run it themselves.
You know, and what's amazing to me, and this is probably part of the reason that I'm, you know, you and I are both interested in Bitcoin, is because we're open-minded, which is like, why don't we have more conversations about this? You know, there are opportunities for us to burn the waste and convert it into usable energy, but we don't talk about these things. And Bitcoin is similarly poised. I guess it's like these are things that are clearly working and have worked for a lot of time, but what is it that is hindering people from having an honest conversation about it, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, like anything, it gets politicized. You know, I kind of learned from a very young age. I'm the oldest of four, but I know my brother, when he was in third grade soccer, I love this story because it's funny. There were three dads that were the coaches of their team. And one day, I'm not sure what happened. I was not there from it. But there basically was almost like a fist fight altercation between three grown men, like literally dads, you know, in their 40s, 50s, whatever age.
Crazy.
over, I'm sure it was over playtime of their sons or whatever it was, to
Yeah.
the point where the town, they're rec soccer. So the town municipal soccer, this isn't the World Cup. They're not playing for the United States or Brazil or Argentina or the top teams in the world. This is third grade soccer. So 8-year-old kids, 9-year-old kids, whatever it is, they almost get in a fist fight over it. The town stepped in and decided to hire a coach so that way they could. And yeah, that's not political in the sense of red or blue or Republican or Democrat, but it seems to be that, the more conservative minded people or libertarian minded people like Bitcoin, and Democrats or more liberal people think it's a waste of energy. It's horrible for the environment. And there's a quote that I love that I hear a lot, especially lately, like Bitcoin's for enemies. I've definitely seen, Bitcoin maximalism gets a lot of toxicity, and you see that in Twitter and other places. But at the end of the day, if you hold Bitcoin and they hold Bitcoin, you get the same gains at the end of the day. Yeah. So it really is the money of enemies.
Yeah, for sure. And, going back to your point where libertarians and conservatives are more naturally inclined to being interested in Bitcoin. You're right. That is definitely the case. And
I hate that though. Like I really do. Like I hate that it's like, oh, conservative libertarian, you're about Bitcoin, liberal or Democrat, you're not. Like I really despise that. I would love to see more liberal minded and more Democrat people to come into the space. We need it. They need it. Like they don't realize it. They need it. Like
I know. And what we don't want, or what we do want, is essentially the same things. I think like the Bernie Sanders crowd, for instance, who they're big about sort of the redistribution of wealth, or more so, I would say, a more fair and equitable distribution of wealth. I'm definitely not a Bernie Sanders fan by any regard, and I don't want to get into politics, but I think the fact that Bitcoin incentivizes a world where we don't have near the waste, where we value our time so much more, and most importantly, where money cannot be manipulated to the point where essentially the rich can make themselves richer simply by just being rich. Bitcoin is a store of value which forces us as individuals to actually cooperate with one another and earn that value in an ethical way. And that's how that cannot be attractive to a liberal-minded person. It's pretty mind-blowing, I think. But again, to your point about the ESG sort of stuff, I can see how that is an initial turnoff for sure. And a lot of people, I was victim to some of the FUD at the very beginning of my Bitcoin, days as well. It just takes time. And again, that's kind of what whole Bitcoin is about. It's just about taking time, starting the intrigue and starting conversations with people so that, okay, let's chip away at this a little bit. Now that this person knows that, let's say I'm passionate about it, I'm like one of my good friends, not very interested in Bitcoin, but knows that I'm passionate about it. That's all the intrigue we need, because now that person is going to follow Bitcoin because they want to see, hey, maybe Caleb's getting rich right now, or maybe I can prove Caleb wrong because XYZ had happened. It's hard to do, but once you can get somebody kind of in the flow of, maybe I should look into this a little bit more and consider what might actually be happening. So
yeah, definitely. And I think even going, like I said, kind of want to stay away from the politics side, but it pulls into everything. Like Andrew Yang, he was talking with Jeff Booth a couple months ago, loved his book. And I think what Andrew Yang is doing, like people in the Bitcoin community, not to speak down to him, but obviously his idea of UBI and like, not handing out free money, but that's basically what he's doing on the fiat standard. The Bitcoiners are definitely quick to bash him, but I think him breaking away from the Democratic Party and forming his own party is bigger than anyone understands. And, like it's seeing that by nature, like the government kind of tries to smash these two parties that are much more similar than most people people realize. And it's red versus blue. Obviously the media loves to hinge on one side or the other, or there's no such thing as unbiased media before, and I'm guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of it in this day and age. But, they're much more similar than they are different. It's almost like you're watching like a drama or a movie where they are incendiary about each other. But let's be honest, Democrats and Republicans, when the cameras are on, they hate each other. Once the lights turn off, the alcohol starts flowing, the cigarettes start coming out, the cigars start going, like that's when the wheeling and dealings happen.
Same party. Yeah, exactly.
And you could see that. I mean, I've only been alive since Clinton, but okay, Clinton, we spent a lot of money. And then Bush, we spent more money. And then Obama, we spent more money. And then Trump, we spent more money. And now Biden's trying to break that record in the first year of his going here to spend more than Trump did in all the other times. Right. So it's insane. It's insanity. They're very much I don't want to say slaves to the fiat masters, but who funds their campaigns? You can look that up. It's public knowledge. Of course, mainstream media doesn't publish that because, and it's even funny when they're going after Trump or Bush or whoever it may be that's more conservative, even though they're calling them out. It's interesting that they never bring up the finances. Yes, they wanted Trump's tax record, so that is finances, but it's not like, oh, here's the list of all the contributors of Trump. Oh, but also look, here's the contributors of Biden. Like that never comes up because the media funds them. Oh, big pharma funds them. Oh, big tech funds them. It's the irony of it all. And, I know this is probably incendiary to say, I would love for Trump to run in 2024, but not as a Republican. I would love for the Republicans to make a stand and say, no, you're not welcome in our party, which they most likely do. And whoever they pick, I won't be a predictor of the future. I'll let them decide as a party. But I'd love for Trump to do a Patriot Party. I'd love for Andrew Yang to do a party. I would love if AOC broke away. I'd love if Bernie Sanders broke away. We're forcing centralization of power because they can control it. But if we decentralize parties, I mean, we're one of the first countries, one of the only countries that we have two parties. I guess you can really look historically. I don't want to misstep, but I know we've really only had two parties for 100 years, 150 years, I think. But when you think about all these other countries, a lot of times they have 5 parties or 8 parties or 10 parties. So like, it's very interesting. And, that's what Bitcoin loves, decentralization across globes, border, anything.
Yeah.
Sorry for my rant there. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Well, and the thing that makes it all possible is being able to transfer value without actually contributing anything of value. For instance, wars don't create value to anybody. In a free market economy, you create value and you exchange that value with somebody else. You enhance that person's life in some way, right? War doesn't do that, okay? Like in the past, for instance, like Napoleon, France we bought the Louisiana Purchase for like $1 million, like $15 million or something like that, so that France could finance Napoleon's attempt to take over the world essentially. But that was back when humans used gold as money. That wasn't. But the reality is that once Napoleon went through that money, what was he going to do? He has to keep selling things of value to the point where he's basically just going to fight himself out of money, and that sort of that has gone and spilled over into not just war, but so many other things in government. And I would say you just look at the deficit that our government runs. The only reason that they are able to function is because they were able to create money out of thin air by borrowing it against the future, which we all know is probably never going to get paid back. And that is what's so important about Bitcoin is, I guess one could argue that sure, you could borrow against Bitcoin and we could let the same thing happen all over again. But I think this time in history, it's a little bit different, in particular because the scale of what is probably going to happen is so large that we're going to be very, very careful not to fall into the same trap.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. You're saying that debt's never going to be paid away, and this is very interesting, and not many people know this, and this is not something you'd find in the mainstream media. Right after George W. Bush won, so the George Bush Jr. In 2001, do you know, like, I'll ask you this and then I'll answer if you don't know. Yeah. Do you know what after being inaugurated, his first place that he went right after inauguration? I don't know if you know.
No, I don't.
His first trip right after doing that, instead of doing thanking people, doing whatever, His first flight after inauguration was to China. And
Really?
a lot of people don't know that, but he went over to China, and what he was trying to do was trying to offshore our manufacturing to China. And someone would say, why would you do that? That's very un-American. You're helping, someone that's kind of been seen as an enemy of the United States for at least the last 50 years or so.
Right.
So why would you go about doing that? And what he was doing is he was offshoring our manufacturing for cheaper labor and cheaper goods for us to push our dollars into other parts of the world. And someone would be like, oh, like, what's that mean? Like, it's like, yeah, when we don't see inflation because we're the world's reserve currency, it's because we're offshoring our dollars to Libya, Nigeria, South America, we're offshoring, we're sending it somewhere else. A lot of times, a lot of our goods go to China. So we are sending them US dollars, and they are sending us cheap goods because they run under a more authoritarian regime. And what you don't see is, so China for the longest time, from 2001 to about 2014, would also prop up the American economy in the sense that they were buying the US bonds and also US equities. Back in 2014, they kind of saw the writing on the wall. The Chinese, even though, I may not agree with the CCP and what they do, and this is nothing against the Chinese people. I hate classifying it. I do it more against governments. So the CCP themselves, what they saw is they saw the problem that they've seen in history. They saw it, with the French, they saw it with the Romans. Like, the Chinese have a very rich history of watching dynasties fall. And, they've even watched their own dynasty fall. Luckily, what they have under a more authoritarian regime is they have the ability to outlast a president, whether it's 4 years or 8 years. When you're going strong for 50 years, you know that you can outlast. Exactly. So you just weather the storm and weather the tide. So in 2014, they saw that our money was doomed to collapse. And they had reason to believe it was relatively soon. And while this can keep going, the money printing, keep sending it to other places, that's true. But China decided this is our time to strike. So ultimately, they stopped buying U.S. bonds and U.S. stocks. So that would obviously be a cause for concern if you are a stockbroker or someone like that. You realize that a lot of your clients are no longer buying what you're selling. So that's kind of towards the end of Obama's campaign. Things are kind of, there's a lot of divide in the world, and ultimately leads to we're seeing a lot of money and potentially inflation and problems. So obviously this is why Trump was able to come in against Hillary Clinton and win and say, we're going to make America great. We're going to go back to the way we were, and to a point when he says make America great again, what he's referring to is a stronger currency. It was still a weak currency, but it was stronger in the sense that we had not printed away as much as we had done, not as much damage in the 70s and 80s. So ultimately, what China started doing in 2014, 2015, 2016 is the Sun and Belt Initiative. So instead of taking the dollars and putting them into basically worthless pieces of paper, whether it's bonds or equities, even though the Chinese market really values real estate, the government quickly stopped that because the last thing they would want is all of us to be owing money to Chinese landlords. So they put restrictions on foreign people with getting assets from the United States. And ultimately, I don't think our government would ever let that really happen. Yes, there are foreign multinational corporations that own land in the United States that are based in China. But with that being said, China said, well, these dollars are worthless. We can't buy their equity. We can't buy their bonds. We can't buy real estate. So what's the next best thing to do? We're going to ship it to countries whose currencies are collapsing. So they ship it to places in Africa and basically we'll build a hospital for you with these dollars. But if you default on this debt, which they're inevitably going to do at a weaker currency, we get to own your country. And that's basically what's been going on. US sends dollars to China. China says, we don't want these dollars. So they take it like any smart investor. They take the cash or cash flow and they invest it in something else. They're investing in global domination. The United States is investing in, basically just they're investing in shipping money elsewhere and war. And we've not been very good at war in the last 50 years. So the cycle is starting to end. I mean, there's ways to keep this thing going, but that's kind of the way it is. And that's, it's studying Fed policy, monetary theory, history, and all that. It's very interesting, but you see a lot of nuances of it.
Yeah, for sure. And what is all to blame? It's essentially human beings being at the core of deciding our own currency, I guess. Maybe that's not or fiat currency, it's currency that can be manipulated by a small group of people is probably a better way to explain that. And it's kind of like what you were hinting at. It's like, well, you can't really blame them. I mean,
no, I don't blame them at all. Like, what else would I would do? That's what I would do. Obviously, Bitcoin doesn't fit in with their ethos. We can see what they just did in the last couple months for the millionth time they banned it. But
right? Which is essentially an admission that that they can't ban Bitcoin because they didn't ban Bitcoin and then allow it again and then ban it. No, they just banned because they can't stop it. So they have to reiterate, oh yeah, this is illegal, So
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I'm sure there's people in China that still hold it and are, obviously are probably careful. They probably don't spend it.
right,
They don't want to be known by the government that they own it. So, you hope that they're using Matt Odell's privacy tools or
yeah,
ways of figuring out to keep it safe from seizure and capture or like getting jailed, basically.
yeah,
Or you hope that they fled while all this was going down.
yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely very, very interesting. And like I said, what is I think in the art of war, it's always like, study your enemy. So I haven't read it, but I've seen a lot of the quotes. It's basically
yeah,
like studying your enemy in the sense of like you can respect like their decisions, knowing that like where they're trying to go. It's like you don't have to like them, but like in terms of what their strategy is, you can respect what they're doing and understand it.
right, yeah. What's like the book Economics in One Lesson? I can't remember who wrote it, but
Yeah, I don't
the whole
remember.
basically the one lesson, spoiler alert, I guess, is economics is all about incentives, and really that's human behavior is all about incentives. So yeah, you just follow the incentives, and so that's part of the reason that I fell in love with Bitcoin so much is because it is so simple at its core. So it's pretty easy for me to look at trends of the past, to look at fundamentals of Bitcoin, and to see the path of the future. Who knows when that is going to happen because everything outside of Bitcoin is so complex and layered and messed up. But um, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen eventually. So
Yeah. And I guess so. We've been just going now. So I guess I
yeah,
want to ask, what ultimately got you into Bitcoin? So
yeah,
when did you hear about it? What year? What were your touch points for it? And then what ultimately made you decide to buy it?
yeah. Okay, so this is kind of I could go on. I could do the story forever, so I'm going to try to keep it as concise and valuable as
No, no,
possible.
make it go on. I'd love to hear it. Full
Okay,
story.
so it all started. So before before we moved to Florida, I was doing remodeling and construction work. So I was remodeling our house. We had bought a house to live in it and flip it, and I was doing drywall mud, which is one of the worst jobs on the planet. If any of your audience members are drywall mudders, props to them because that job sucks. Anyway, I was listening to the book Atlas Shrugged. If you've ever read it,
I have
super
not,
well.
but I've heard a lot about it. Yes,
Yeah,
it's on my list.
yeah, pretty popular book with Bitcoiners especially. Um, but it's like how long? Like a 40-hour read or something like that. So, you imagine 5 full 8-hour days of listening to a book, which I could just about do because I wasn't fast at drywall mudding. Anyway, there's a speech by a character named Francisco d'Anconia, and he shattered my understanding of what money is. And I'm sure you've been through this with the other Bitcoiners on the show, but money, if we're talking a chicken and egg scenario, we know that the money came after the value. The money didn't exist beforehand. The value that is in the world is finite at any given time, and the amount of money can never possibly be inflated or deflated to match that value at any specific moment in time, right? So um, what we ended up doing was picking gold as a store of value, and that made me understand his speech made me understand why, and that's essentially because we could choose to trade anything as a store of value. In fact, historically we have. Um, from the yap stones and from beads to shells, all kinds of things.
To
And
cattle, different, even
yeah,
livestock and stuff.
yeah, salt was, when there was basically multi currencies, you had salt and you had wheat and you had cows, and you could break those units down and understandably enough know that, okay, I'm going to sell you I don't know, 1,000 pounds of salt for a cow or something like that, and that made sense to people. But ultimately, we landed on this one really, 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 really good currency, which was gold. The only downside to it was that you really couldn't split it up very easy. And it was also hard to carry around, especially if you had a lot of it. So these are all things that this one part of the book kind of shattered everything that I understood to know about money. And I was like, man, this is just crazy to think about because I had never money was money, like I just value the dollar bill because I knew that I was supposed to. And I knew that other people accepted it. So a couple of months go by and I was listening to a podcast, a libertarian podcast actually, and he had on Guy Swan. Are you familiar with Guy Swan?
Yes, I love Guy Swan. I'd love to have
Yeah.
him on the show sometime.
Yeah, you have to. He was on the show and he was basically introducing Bitcoin, and that was where my intrigue about Bitcoin really started. I had heard about Bitcoin in its bull run in 2017, but I thought, okay, well, this is probably like a one-off thing. It hit 20,000 and now it's down. Like, this is ridiculous. So I started thinking, I started like doing a little bit of research, and I fell down. And I don't know how this happened because honestly, I can't when I look back, I don't know how to justify it, but I sort of fell down the perspective of blockchain, not Bitcoin, and I have no idea why. I think it was honestly because I started researching blockchain, and um, when you research blockchain, it's very difficult to get a good idea of what it is, if that makes sense. Because when people it's such a buzzword that it is like expanded upon like the size of the universe. It just never ends. I mean, people claim that we could build entire databases in Uber, and you could rebuild every web application that we ever have on a blockchain. And it wasn't until continuing to listen and learn about Bitcoin that I realized, okay, no, blockchain is really just one piece of the Bitcoin machine, and it has a very specific application. And yes, it's got a special name, but I guess it really doesn't necessarily need a special name, because all it is it's a long list of transactions that have confirmations between each each state and time. And it's really pretty simple. It's not a new technology. I mean, we've essentially got, with I don't want to be too incorrect, but we've essentially got blockchains already, but not in the sense that they're being talked about now. Like a ledger is basically a blockchain.
Yeah, an
You look
Excel
at
spreadsheet is
yeah,
basically a blockchain. It's
right,
just
exactly.
graphically or the way you're looking at it.
Yeah. So it's like, so breaking that barrier was my big sort of like, okay, no, Bitcoin is the technology. So I ended up actually selling some shares of Tesla, which I think is ironic because it's like the opposite of Bitcoin. Um, I sold some shares of Tesla in December of 19 or something like that, and bought Bitcoin at that time. And I looked at it at that point. I looked at it as, you know what? I think I still feel like this is a very, very risky thing, but I'm willing to be very, very risky with this money. It's not a lot of money, and if it goes to zero, what the heck goes to zero? I don't need it now. So it wasn't until about a year and a half later, and like I told you, this story is long, but so a year and a half later, my son was born, and I've told this story on Daniel Prince's podcast, and I wrote a newsletter about it as well. But I remember being in the hospital room with my wife and holding my son, and just realizing that all I ever wanted to do is just be with these people. Like, this is what is the most important thing in the world. We all value, things that we think will make us happy, whether it's going to be, you buy a bunch, if you from an investing perspective, you buy a bunch of stocks, or you buy a Nintendo Switch, like these things, they think you're going to make you happy, but really, um, and I don't think anybody can disagree, is being able to spend time with your loved ones is probably one of the most important things that you could ever do with your time. And so as I'm holding my son and being in the hospital room, I just realized that I've lived 20 years of my life, and yeah, I've probably got another 80 years or so left. And it's like my time just exponentially got more valuable. And in fact, I don't want to go to work, when this is all done. Like, I want to be here with these people. And I think that was when I went from Bitcoin as an investment to Bitcoin as a way to store, like, actually keep that hard-earned value that I have worked so hard to, I don't know, to fund my life essentially. And so that from that point on, I guess the rest is history. I started listening to podcasts and reading books like crazy, and it just completely transformed the way that I look at Bitcoin philosophically. Yes, I think it is a fantastic investment, which is what what your audience wants to know. But I also believe it is an opportunity for, if not me, then my children or my children's children to live the life that they want to live, because it is so insulting to essentially be forced to earn an income in something that is just melting away day by day, or to be the last people who are affected as far as the price adjustments go, so to essentially go through these periods as human beings, go through these periods where, oh, suddenly it's harder for me to afford groceries, and now I got to ask for more money from my employer in order to just keep up with the cost of living. I'm the last one to sort of to see that increase in pay. It's such an insult to have to go through that cycle, but also to go through to like to be expected that, the, to be expected that if you want to maintain this value, which your most valuable asset in life is your time, if you want to be expected to maintain it, you have to invest it. You have to buy a home. You have to buy stock. You have to essentially take a risk with it in order to stay ahead. And that's not right. That's not the way that life should be. So
yeah,
yeah.
I think even though it was a long story, I think that was an excellent story. I think it explains the importance of Bitcoin and why it's like that. I was very fortunate. So like I said, my first touch point was 2017. Someone who was not an investor was just like, I thought it was Tulip Mania in 2017. Someone was like, we should all buy Bitcoin and we'll all get rich.
Well, that's what everybody thought it was, and that, but that's what the headlines were telling us.
Yeah. So, but even them, they were not a person that was a normal investor, and they were just kind of saying it. And, I always love the stories of when, or not love the stories, but when hedge fund managers, or when like basically everyone's getting rich, and then they ultimately end up selling. And then 6 weeks later, a month later, the market ends up crashing to a new low because there was a famous story of a guy, one of the, not JP Morgan or someone, basically he was getting his shoes shined. So, that shows the time period in like 1929. And the shoe shiner was like, oh, I mortgaged my house and I'm buying all these stocks because I'm going to get like incredibly wealthy. So he went back into the office and sold all his shares. And then like 6 weeks later, the Great Depression happened. So like ultimately a great trade, but he really timed the market because he was like, people that would never do investments all of a sudden are saying like, invest all your money. So it was kind of like one of those things where it was an acquaintance that was like, we should all buy it and we'll all get rich. And lo and behold, they were right, but like they had no reasoning behind it. It was just like, it was mania. Like it's like, we should do it. Ultimately I went up to 20,000 and then crashed. And I was like, I was right. I was correct. It was Tulip Mania, too good to be true. We saw it. It's a shame. And that's kind of the way I left it in 2017. Ultimately 2020, I think in a lot of times, and I said this, I had tomorrow, the episode's coming out with Adam Meister. And in that episode, I said, I remember I was sitting around at dinner in probably like April or May of 2020. And, my family was definitely taking the pandemic and being locked down and everything that was going on pretty hard. And I basically said, I was like, all I see is opportunity. And I really started digging into reading more. I have a bunch of books. I always point them out over here, all these books that I've read. And, I got another stack on the side that I'm trying to read. So trying to get through them. But ultimately, what I was saying is like, all I see is opportunity. And I started doing the Bitcoin standard, money master the game. I will teach you to be rich. I've always loved finances. I was just kind of like, oh, put in an index fund and just let it go. But, then I was it piqued my curiosity. I'm like, well, maybe I can get better returns in the market. And they're always like, oh, like no one ever beats the market. It's like, well, some people do, but you have to be smart. And, like Warren Buffett always says, like diversification is for if you don't know what you're doing. So like, that's why he always recommends putting in an index fund instead of trying to pick stocks and do all that, because you're probably better off in the long run. And that's good advice. If you don't know what you're doing, if you just want to be passive, you want to set it, forget it. But you can do that with Bitcoin, which is great. And even that, like I started learning about money. And then even one of my favorite books to this day, I still love this book, Money Master the Game, Tony Robbins. He interviews Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, all the big names. He talks about money, talks about how fiduciaries can act not in their own best interest. Some of them are kind of fraudulent. Like they say certain words and they're acting as a fiduciary. And then all of a sudden they say another keyword and they're acting in their, like, not as a fiduciary. Right. So like he was going through the process of trying to get the best possible returns for people. And, Ray Dalio has a lot of respect from the globe and, how successful he's been. And in talking to that, like his one trade of like doing bonds and as a hedge against stocks, I always thought was really, really smart. He talks about his all-weather portfolio. 50% bonds, 30% equity, 7% gold, 3% real estate. And it's kind of like his portfolio that regardless of what the market happens, you can like be successful. And that's true when he started trading and getting into economics when interest rates are at 14%. But even, like his convictions finally come around to Bitcoin. And he said most recently that like, I'd rather own Bitcoin than a bond. So like Ray Dalio played the game to a T perfectly, probably better than most. He's a billionaire. He's in the top 5,500 people in the world, whatever it is. He's in the top 1% of the 1% of people that have made money. And he'll remain there because of what he did. But ultimately, he knows the game's over. Like, his trading strategy won't work again because bonds don't go from 0 to negative 14. And if they do, there's going to be a lot bigger issues in the world if that were to be the case. So, it kind of really had me go through and really learn, not just like someone says, do this and I do it. It was like, okay, well, why is that? Why is this an issue? How is the stock market propped up? What is the Federal Reserve? Like I really did a lot of research and ultimately it led my conclusion to Bitcoin. Since I had done a lot of research, I did come to that. I will admit, I owned a little bit of Ethereum, as most people in the space have owned some type of altcoin.
I can't blame you, man. I mean, they're incredible marketers. Like when I was researching Bitcoin, I just kind of was Googling around and I was like, man, this Ethereum stuff sounds way better than Bitcoin.
Yeah. So I had always owned more Bitcoin, which I'm very proud of. But I thought like when I bought Ethereum, it was like $700, $800. I'm like, I have a whole Ethereum. This is awesome. Like I didn't have a whole Bitcoin. I had more in value of Bitcoin, but like I didn't have a whole one at that point. So I was like, oh, like this is cool Ethereum. And then I just started doing more research. I'm like, oh, this is just like another fiat Ponzi scheme. Yeah, they put a word cryptocurrency. Yeah, they put the word blockchain, but like you really learn why it's Bitcoin over everything else. Yeah. And I guess my BS detector has gotten better because I've done all this research, done all these different things. And I actually love hearing criticism of Bitcoin because I think it helps like, iron or steel sharpens steel in the sense of like, if you find out ways that people are going to attack it or the ways it can be attacked, it gives you understanding of how to prevent that or how to like, get ahead of it, how to prevent your attacker from getting to you. Like taking it off an exchange, like putting it in a hot wallet, putting it in a cold storage, putting it like all these different things, your privacy, coin joining, all these different things that you can do with it. But ultimately, I came to the conclusion that was only Bitcoin. And basically, you kind of see the scheme behind all the other cryptocurrencies, like what they really are, why they're schemes, and you've done a really good evaluation of that. I know I kind of rambled there, so I don't know if you want to add to that.
That's great. I mean, no, you had some awesome points. I would say, so have you had anybody on to talk specifically about some of the other schemes and some of the other cryptocurrencies, quote unquote, cryptos that are out there?
I mean, I've only had Bitcoiners talk about Bitcoin. I've actually never had, any other altcoin founder or people that even shill it or own it, to be honest.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think it would be cool to have a debate. I know a lot of the maxis would be very they worry about, obviously if they're doing their whole marketing spiel, you'd worry that people would go into a certain investment. I'm all for the free markets and people making their own decision. I'll pitch why I think Bitcoin's the best investment and I see it for the foreseeable future. But yeah, no, I've never had anyone else that's had it. I've had other Bitcoiners that have said, yeah, I've owned other things in the past, but I either own only Bitcoin or, they're 100% Bitcoin or majority Bitcoin and then the rest in some other things. But yeah.
Well, and so I like I had said at the beginning, I'm pretty unapologetically a Bitcoin maximalist. I have tried to do honest research about other cryptocurrencies, but I'm not going to be able to speak to them as articulately as somebody who is passionate about a Dogecoin or something like that. I can only tell you from a fundamental level why I don't think any other cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin is essentially going to work. And I'm sure that, you've had this conversation with the other Bitcoiners on the show, and that's essentially Bitcoin solves a very specific problem, and that is the corruption of a standard of value. Satoshi Nakamoto and the developers who initially built Bitcoin were able to figure out through mathematics how to create a decentralized network in which we have for the first time really in the universe, but also like human history, but also universally, to have true knowable scarcity of just 21 million Bitcoin. I mean, nothing in the universe is knowably scarce like Bitcoin is. Once it's created, it's created, and that's the specifics of this tool. You could call it Bitcoin, you could call it whatever you want, but it solves a very specific problem. And any tool that I guess is claiming to do that better, first of all, hasn't proven to do so through free market and people choosing the other cryptocurrencies, but can also be adopted by Bitcoin in the end. So it's almost like all of these other cryptocurrencies are a bunch of different hard fork test nets for people to see, okay, well, this implementation work or this implementation work, because the network of Bitcoin is so large and at basically unstoppable at this point that if there's something like that you and I want to see implemented with the network and to secure our money, to make our money better, we're going to be incentivized to adopt it into our money, which is, where we place our value. So it will be very interesting to see what happens in the future with all these other cryptocurrencies. I see the world now where there's hundreds of currencies. All these countries have their own currencies, but will humanity ever wise up to the fact that it's like, what's the point? We have one and it works. It's really exciting now. Bitcoin is and cryptocurrencies now, but money shouldn't be. Money should be the most boring, not even investment, the most boring thing in the world, because it should just work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we don't get excited over the fiat dollar. I mean, that's what Bitcoin should be. Yeah, we're seeing the gains in fiat terms, but yeah, I completely agree. And to that sentiment, I actually don't hate altcoins. And I say that with a caveat in the sense that, like you said, they're basically free research for Bitcoin. If Ethereum were to come out something, maybe not proof of stake, but if they were to do something life altering, world changing, like, oh my God, this is amazing. Bitcoin's open source protocol. It can just plug it in. If the developers agree and the community and consensus agrees that it's safe, it's going to benefit Bitcoin. It's not just a short-term scammy kind of thing, whether it's SegWit 2x or, SegWit adoption or the Lightning Network or all these other things. I think that's what's going to happen. I see the way that Bitcoin's going to expand now is in layers. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, they criticize the Lightning Network. It's not as good as an altcoin because of X, Y, and Z. And, I can see their critiques for what it's worth. But I think that the base layer is so set. And the network has grown to now $1 trillion or over $1 trillion, obviously, depending on where the price is, but about $1 trillion network right now. that the base layer, we can not safely say, but pretty much say that like it's it's the hardest, soundest layer that we've ever had, and
Yeah.
that we don't see too much change happening there.
Right.
With that said, Lightning Network, oh, the Liquid Network, oh, like other things being built on top of it, and the foundation is always comes back to the base layer instantaneously, instantly. Like I believe that's going to be the way that Bitcoin really scales. And we're just even Lightning's really in infancy when you think about it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
incredible with El Salvador adopting it, but
Yeah.
it's still really in infancy by comparison.
It really is. Yeah,
Um,
and to the implications of which we don't understand. I think that when people draw comparisons to the internet when it was initially built are spot on. Like when
and it's
you
growing 2 times faster than that too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's like when, when the internet was initially built, and let's say an email or I guess it would have probably just been a string of text was transferred from one computer to another for a certain, however far away. They didn't think, oh, you know what? Someday this is probably going to transform into ride sharing or video streaming or video sharing or
Or
virtual
social media or
social media.
Amazon, or like, yeah, like they had no idea that it would create more businesses and more wealth than anything ever before.
Exactly. So imagine what a network of decentralized truth can do for human ingenuity and innovation. I mean, this is why Bitcoin is so exciting, because it opens up an entirely, just a completely new world of possibility that we can't even fathom it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think we're just saying why it's such a great investment, and what we see it becoming. It's almost like we're past the stage of early adoption, because it's
Yeah.
becoming more and more mainstream, and with
Yeah.
MicroStrategy buying it last year and stuff. But we're still early adopters, and I've always said this. I've always had liked investing, and I really think the pandemic. I it's horrible, the tragedies and the people that died, and the what's really the authoritarian governments that are appearing all over the world, but it's really helped wake me up. I think I'd be kind of a fiat slave of like, okay, keep putting in the 401k, keep doing the same thing, trying to max
Right.
out my 401k, try to max out a Roth IRA. And while I won't deter people from doing that investment, that's ultimately their decision, but you kind of see the blinders are off, and I'm like, okay, there's other things out there, there's better investments, there's like, why am I doing this? And instead of being like I should retire at 65, I always said to my dad, I hope to retire by 40. And I kind of see this as a way to do so.
Yeah.
If I keep working hard and keep doing ways to generate it, I definitely can see that being the case. I don't plan on selling my Bitcoin, so I got to figure out a way to get crafty to have all this net worth and figure out a way to preserve it, but
Right.
we'll get there when we get there.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea is that you just borrow against it.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real possibility as being sort of a standard practice for generational wealth and families. Imagine having, let's say you have one Bitcoin, and when my wife and I are gone, we pass that one Bitcoin on to our children, and instead of selling that Bitcoin for a house, they mortgage against it. They mortgage against their own Bitcoin, and they're literally their own bank, and they're sort of paying themselves back in that way, I guess. So
Yeah.
it just completely changes the game, from the financial, well, economically, but also, but in particular, the way that we look at banks and banking. It just completely changes the game, which I guess leads me into another thought. As I was getting into Bitcoin, I have what's called, or I got rid of it because it was so worthless, but I had what was called a Google Now feed, or like a Google News feed on the home screen of my phone. All you had to do, it was super easy. You just swipe to the left or whatever, and there was a big screen, of news articles, and that was all curated to. It was all from your search history, right? And so, of course, that started quickly populating with Bitcoin articles, and I would say probably 90% of them were negative articles, and
Really?
yeah. Yep. And not to say that Google is necessarily conspiring to put out negative Bitcoin content. I just think that's the content that's out there. I mean, if you Google, just simply Google Bitcoin, you're probably going to find at least more than half is going to be negative information about Bitcoin, because those mainstream sources that you and I were talking about earlier, they don't like it for the very reason that I was talking about, which is the transformation of the financial industry. Unfortunately, we with this system, we don't really need the banks anymore, at least the way that they're structured now. The reason that banks were created is because we needed a way to to physically store our value to keep it safe, um, but also we needed an arbiter between us to maintain the currency and maintain the peg to, I guess, at the time when banks were created, to gold. But with this new system, it's not needed. So when you see any one of these negative headlines about Bitcoin, I encourage you to read it, but also to consider the substance of what is being asserted. Um, it, in the past few years in particular, I've become extremely um, distrusting is a strong word, but it's so hard for me to read any headline and be like, oh, that's fact. Like I know that there's got to be something in there that's either intentionally left out, or there's some sort of opinion in it that isn't the fair and just representation of the truth. And when you're looking at those headlines about Bitcoin, um, I recommend you do the same, but like 100-fold.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I guess before we start wrapping up, I've probably got a few more questions before we start wrapping up
Yeah,
here.
and I got time, so if you want to go, that's fine.
Yeah, no, we can go a little bit longer. So I guess a thing that I saw on your website, which I thought was great, it was a
Yeah,
quote at the bottom page. It was like, "We're an organization dedicated to spreading the conviction that Bitcoin and Bitcoin only is the best way to store and exchange value. No more corrupt banks, bankers, and politicians. Just code." I thought I was going to add one little thing. What was mined into the first block of the Bitcoin blockchain was the
yeah,
Times 03 January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. And this was a headline that was, I think, in the New York Times publishing. I forget what article it was, but it was basically a newspaper headline, and
yeah.
that was right when it was the OPSEC that was put on the Bitcoin blockchain
Yep,
and will be forever be there, mined into
right,
the first block.
right.
So I guess with that being said, I guess what's your favorite design feature of Bitcoin? I know we've been talking a lot about how it works and how it is and all that, but I guess what
Yeah.
would be your single favorite design feature of Bitcoin?
The um, it's changed over time, but I would say it's the difficulty adjustment. Um, Bitcoin is a freedom tool, and the difficulty adjustment is the implementation of being an unstoppable money. Uh, China, for instance, just banned Bitcoin mining a couple months ago, and then they outright banned Bitcoin as well. But what happened was, is all of the miners they from China, they were forced to leave the network. And have you been through some of the technicalities of how Bitcoin mining works?
Yeah, so I've had Adam O or Denver Bitcoin on.
Oh, okay. So
Uh,
you're okay. Yep. So you guys are well versed in how it works. So what happened was, the miners, the from China, they all went offline, and there were times where I think there was even a block that took like 2 hours to mine.
yeah,
And it was because the difficulty adjustment was so high that people, the miners were just having a hard time solving the problem. And so the probability of finding the solution to that equation was much lower with less miners. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, now we're seeing a hash rate. We saw the network adjust, and even though there was a block of 2 hours or whatever it was, an extended period of time, normally they're 10-minute blocks. After 2 weeks, or I don't know at what point, a few days, when the difficulty adjustment happened, the the network went back to normal, and it just kept turning out blocks every 10 minutes, just like it's supposed to. And the reality is, although this is extremely unlikely from a game theory standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint, if every country in the world were to instantaneously ban Bitcoin, the difficulty adjustment would be such that it would send us back to like a 2009, where we could mine with CPUs, we could mine with GPUs. So as long as you have an internet connection and a computer, you can still mine Bitcoin. The network will adjust for the number of miners that are out there maintaining the network, and that is the most fascinating thing to me about it. It's like no matter what you do to try to stop it, it's not going anywhere. So
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. And I think Satoshi Nakamoto, I mean, he is a genius. He's quite literally a genius.
right,
I
right,
think he might be the first person to win the Nobel Economic Prize and the Nobel Peace Prize at the same time for
right.
just like, I forget what the economic one has a certain name, but he might be the
I
first
just
person
I
to,
just hoping it happens in my lifetime.
yeah, no,
It will happen, but man, I just hope I get to see it.
yeah, and like, but so I agree. The difficulty adjustment is insane, but even the level of detail that you don't even realize. Do you know that Satoshi Nakamoto's birthday? Do you know what his birthday is?
Yes, I do. It's what was it the day? It was no, it wasn't when we left the gold standard. What was it? Was it
Yeah,
a
so
detail?
I'm pretty sure it was,
Oh, okay.
or maybe it was the confiscation of gold or whatever.
That's what it was. Executive Order 6102.
Well, but you know, the difficulty adjustment is ever 2016 blocks. That's
Oh, really?
6102 backwards.
No
So
way.
like, and the way that he planned that's every 2 weeks.
Right.
And then so the next biggest thing. So I've gone back and forth in this. I agree. Difficulty adjustment's probably the most nuanced and amazing thing. But the halving cycle. So obviously it
Yep.
started off when Bitcoin started in 2009. You were getting 50 blocks per reward based and all the transactions. Then it
Yep.
became 25 after about 4 years, but it's really every 210,000 blocks. The 210,000 blocks represents another period of time. So like all these weird numbers, you're like, why? Where does all this make sense? It's like
Yeah.
their dates, their times, their
Yeah.
names. It's like
He's
times
writing
when a
history
government was like,
in the code,
what?
and that's what is that's like what's cool, and sort of it's kind of a romanticized idea, but I'm sort of this way, is like he's the United States government, for instance, or I guess the United States of America, we have the Constitution, right? This document that the founding fathers knew would live for, well, hopefully forever. But what he's doing, what he did, Satoshi Nakamoto, was essentially write a constitution in the code of Bitcoin. He put all of these reminders in here, all of these numbers in here. That's like, hey, remember when don't forget about when hard money was banned, or don't forget about when the government's bailed out all of these banks at the expense of everybody who has currency at all. Like, don't forget the reason that Bitcoin exists.
And at the
And
same time, he made something that was like basically sticking up a middle finger to all of that
yeah,
as well. That's the
yeah,
irony of it all. Like
yeah,
he's mocking them and
yeah,
laughing at the end of the day. And
right,
there's obviously a lot of theories of who he was. And I know
yeah,
people are like, oh, how do you know it's not a he, a she, a they?
yeah, right,
I know he refers to himself on the forums as a he, so that was
yeah,
the pronoun that he ultimately decided to go with. But
right,
some people have also theorized he's saying he, but it's really a conglomeration or multiple people, or it even was
yeah,
a girl to throw people's sent off from knowing
yeah.
them.
That could
Um,
be.
I think it's a single person. I'm not sure if they're alive or dead yet, to be honest. And I know, like, depending if you say they're alive or dead, there's people that it can be because of that.
Right.
But I don't know. It's just very, very interesting. And,
And I'm sure there's like a really cool rabbit hole where you could go down and learn about people's theories about him being from the future. Like that is another cool concept to think about. Obviously it's pretty far fetched, but to have somebody like it'd be something from a movie. It's like somebody comes back from a world where the entire world economy has collapsed because of fiat currency and government corruption, and has gone back and essentially designed perfect money at the perfect time. Like it's there's some pretty crazy theories about who Satoshi was.
Yeah, I'd love for them to be a documentary. I know one came out on Netflix, but it was called a cryptocurrency documentary, and I think it was
Yeah.
funded by a lot of Ethereum people or Cardano
Did you
people.
watch it?
I did not watch it yet, but
Okay.
I heard there was something out on Netflix.
Well,
But
and anytime anymore I see anything on Netflix, I start to get a little bit wary of it as well because it
I
seems
heard it was
like
disappointing, or at least what
yeah,
I had heard about it, or what they. I don't know if actually I don't even know if it's out yet, but I know there was being made, and a lot of people are
right.
like, okay, so this is a marketing scheme for altcoins, basically.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is like it's what's the incentive for Netflix to make a Bitcoin documentary unless they're Bitcoin holders, I guess, and want to and truly convicted and want to increase adoption. But based on Netflix's other content and some of the messages that they put out, it doesn't seem likely. So
I would agree. Yeah, so I mean that's pretty much all I got. So Caleb, before I do the wrap up questions, thank you once again for coming on the show. It's been a
yeah,
pleasure having you.
yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on the show and let me talk about Bitcoin. I don't get to talk about it a lot with folks, so being able to or at least have a detailed conversation with folks, so it's awesome to talk about it in depth.
Yeah, and I will say I think people should definitely check out your website. I know you say you're not a company or you don't
Yeah,
feel like it's one, but you have some really cool swag on there. So t-shirts, bags,
yeah,
hats, and
yeah.
stuff like that.
Thank you, man.
I
I
definitely
appreciate
need
it.
to order one, and I will
Yeah,
definitely do so after this episode.
and it's
I
super cheap. I should probably increase the prices honestly because it's all super cheap, but it's really just about getting the message out. So,
yeah,
um, the money that we make from the store it goes right back into the organization. So, whatever you want to do, this is an opportunity for the average pleb to spread the conviction. So,
definitely. So the last three questions I ask all the guests on the show. So,
yeah,
what is the biggest investing or business mistake you've made?
yeah. I, okay, so I would say that when I look back at any business or investing mistake, it's always been for the better. I've always learned something from it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most people, if you don't, then that was a wasted opportunity
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. So it's like it's not necessarily something that I regret, but um, most recently, one of my most recent mistakes, and we just got out of it, was well, okay. So is it okay if I have two? Because
Yeah, go
one's
for it.
kind of
You can do
okay.
one business, one investing, or two investing. I'll let you
Yeah,
go
so
for that.
one's both, I guess, because it was a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme. So when I was in college, I was uh, I was approached by a friend of mine about an MLM called now I can't think of the name. World Ventures, that's what it is. And what it is it's like I'm sure you've heard of it, maybe or maybe you haven't.
I'm actually not familiar with this one. I know a lot of the scams, but I've not heard this one.
Yeah. So, and have you ever heard or sat through a pyramid or like a multi-level marketing presentation
I've
before?
never been to one. I listen to a lot of CoffeeZilla on YouTube where he's kind of exposing them, so I have a good idea of the way
Yeah.
that it works, though.
Right. So, when they do their presentations, it's like the most romantic, exciting thing that you'll ever hear.
They get you hyped up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And me being very entrepreneurial and being interested in investing, this made sense to me. It was like $300 essentially. And after a while, and I'm super glad that I didn't do this. It, got into it in college, but I was considering like getting all of the guys in my fraternity together and talking to them about it. And I'm very glad I didn't because I would have lost all credibility. you know but the concept of getting into a multi-level marketing scheme is you make all of your money by getting other salesmen to join the team, at least not all of it but the majority of it. And I came to the realization it's like, man, I feel so much pressure right now to get other people to join, and I'm essentially by getting other people to join, I'm putting that same pressure on them, and I feel even worse about that.
Yeah.
So that was one of my first ones, and even though it was a very small investment, what it really taught me was that you can't get something for nothing. Like that scheme in particular, it's like, man, that's really something that would have required a ton of work. It would also would have required me to sacrifice my morals as well. So I was like,
Yeah, and even I'll add to that before you begin the next one. But
yeah,
I've seen on a lot of the presentations, or at least what CoffeeZilla says, obviously they're preying on people that are weak, or this is kind of, you were lucky that you probably weren't in that situation. But a
right.
lot of times they'll get people that are like, this is my last hope. I lost my job. I need to do
Oh yeah,
something,
no,
and
I
they
wasn't
like
that.
max
So
out their credit card. I've heard stories of people being like, oh, I'm getting a divorce, and like, I'm going to show him that, like I heard this horrible story about this woman that began crying because she was going through a divorce. She had
yeah,
lost her job. She's like, I'm going to show him I'm going to be the best ever. And they're
yeah,
like, yeah, max out your credit card, $8,000 for the premium package. And it's like,
right,
she ultimately ended up buying, like you said, it was like $300 to get in. It was $8,000 to max out her credit card.
right.
Ultimately, it ended up being like nothing. Or she was selling like a vacuum that was worth $8,000. It's like, what world is a vacuum $8,000?
Right.
So
Yeah, exactly. My wife and I were watching a documentary on Amazon Prime. If you haven't seen that, I recommend it. It's called actually I don't know what it's called, but it's about LuLaRoe. Have you heard of that
no,
company?
I haven't. I'll write that down right now.
Yeah, but it's LuLaRoe, LuLaRoe, and it's an MLM about um, like selling it's a clothing, like yeah, just like kind of designerish clothing. And they're going through this documentary, and there were so many testimonies from people who are like, i I took out like 90 grand in debt because essentially, in order to maintain statuses as a seller, and of course you as you work your way up the ladder and have more people underneath you, you get these elevated statuses. When you're in these elevated statuses, you are required, as to keep that status, you're required to buy a certain amount of clothing, and the margins on it were, I think you're, I don't know this for sure, but I think you're allowed to set your own margins. So from a market perspective, um, everybody is, the more sellers there are, the more driven they are to lower their prices. So actually selling, these people were hardly making, they were hardly making any money actually selling the clothing. Where they were making the money is from, people, from the commissions from the people underneath them. And yeah, that's basically what it was, is the people underneath them. And it wasn't from them selling clothes, it was from them buying the inventory. Like you had to buy the clothes, and then you had to sell it. And again, you were required to buy a certain amount of clothes just to maintain your active status. So um, it gets so sensationalized, and it's like, it's super sexy because it's like, hey, I can be my own boss, and I can make a ton of money. And
They always said I could be my own boss. It's gonna be easy. I will tell you, doing the amateur investors, it's not easy, and I'm not
yep,
making a lot of money.
yeah.
And so,
Right. Well, and I applaud you, man, because I started a podcast a couple of years ago, or no, it was only a year ago or so, and it wasn't really, I didn't have the intention of turning into a business or anything like that. It was more so to just kind of, it was an accountability exercise. And it was called, um, what the heck? Oh, Personal Growth Book Club, which where I was going through the book, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And so it was a way for me to read the chapters and talk through it, and make sure that I was accountable to myself, and and really understood the material as I went through it. And it was very tough to do. Like, so I for being 50 episodes, man, this is good for you, because it's not
yeah,
easy.
I've never missed a week. I don't plan on missing one for the time being. Sometimes I pre-record them a little bit, a week or two in advance, but
Right,
I've never missed it. And I've been sick once.
right,
There was literally one time I was not feeling great, and
yeah,
I took a nap for 5 hours, woke up, edited it, and got it out for the next morning. So
yeah,
I've been
good for
consistent,
you.
and it is an accountability exercise. Whether you're on vacation, if you want to pre-record, that's fine, but it needs to get done
You got to
beforehand.
plan
Or
it, right?
yeah, like I've done 50 straight on every Wednesday, so
Man, good for you.
it's been awesome.
Yeah,
I'll add with the MLM thing. So I was watching CoffeeZilla, and he was interviewing a guy that's been scammed multiple times, whether it was a cryptocurrency or a lot of MLMs.
oh no,
And it was sad. I mean, the guy has done well enough, not off scams, that like ultimately, like, it wasn't like he was retired. He was probably in his mid to late 30s, if I had to
yeah,
guess. he had
Right.
done well in a bunch of like altcoin cryptos that he got very wealthy and then was kind of like reinvesting like the million or 2 million or 5 million that he had. So a lot of
Right.
times he would go on smaller scale stuff of using 50,000 or 100,000. And that, don't get me wrong, that's not small scale. I don't want to downplay the amount of money, but he had a nest egg of
Sure.
5 million. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like he's fine. But he ultimately was falling into habitual scams. So this guy was smart enough to understand cryptocurrency and make enough money, whether trading or doing whatever. And I don't know how valid he was, but he said he had a good nest egg that he was living off. But
Right.
then when he invested, and he's like, he kept getting scammed, and like he was seeing these habitual people. And in the episode, he interviews him. He talks about 2 times that he was scammed, like 2 MLMs. One was an MLM, one was a crypto MLM, which made it even more wild. But
Oh
then,
no.
but then he was even saying how like you get to a point where you start seeing the same people at the same new thing, whether
Yeah.
it's Herbalife, whether it's LuLaRoe, like what it's sad that you start seeing the same people that keep getting like, all I need is my next break and it's going to be this one. And it's like, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
different person leading it because obviously they
Right.
don't trust the person that screwed him last time, but it's
Yeah.
it's like you went from one name to the next name to the next name. So it's just, it was sad.
And there's something to be said about the psychology of those people too. They're, for one, they're open-minded and they're passionate about growing and learning and experiencing new things. So, I can't necessarily say that that's like he's an idiot or that's a bad thing, but also what it sounds like is he's just missing some fundamentals. Truly understanding and being like, I would say that if you get into an investment that is super super sexy, very MLM-ish, and like, look at how amazing my life is after buying this thing, that is your signal to really really understand it. And understand it from top to bottom, in and out, and tear it apart yourself in your own mind. Like with Bitcoin, one of the main things that was holding me back, between the transition between this is a very very risky investment, and this is a super solid investment, besides the emotional sort of change in my life, was, um, I guess, when I realized that Bitcoin was as secure as it was. Like, my fear was that the Bitcoin network would somehow be hacked. And it wasn't until a lot of research and hearing from a lot of different people that even if Bitcoin was hacked, which is, like, at this point, like, statistically improbable, like impossible, even if Bitcoin was hacked, we have tens of thousands of copies of the blockchain. So all we have to do is essentially go back before the hack happened, and Bitcoin's there, fresh and new, and it's fine. Like, the that's the beauty of being open source. So yeah, I mean, uh, I'm more so, I guess, from that perspective, I'm more, I don't know if this is the right term, because I don't study value investing, but like, I'm more like a value investor, and I'm pretty safe when it comes to those riskier investments. It's like, yeah, if I'm going to take a risk, I want to make sure I understand the downsides.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Bitcoin. I know the Warren Buffett and the Charlie Mungers of the world are value investors, and they
Yeah,
do not like Bitcoin.
yeah,
They've
that's
kind of
true.
become a cult in and of themselves. But if you look on a Bitcoin standard, I think in preaching the investment side of things is important because in the event of collapse, maybe everything we want to be instantaneously, what is 5, 10, 20 years. I really think it's going to be closer to 50 years, and we'll see if we're still alive and standing then. But
Yeah,
in the event that the world goes on a Bitcoin standard or a hybrid standard of whatever your fiat currency is, or whatever your Fed coin is of whatever country or denomination, which is the way we're going to go eventually.
right.
If you have Bitcoin as this and then your Fed coin,
Mm,
if Bitcoin's kind of peaked off, or money printing, I don't even know how it would taper in the sense, or like
yeah,
if we start back over again, then in theory your Bitcoin, the only way to get a return on it would be to invest in a different business, whether
yeah,
that's a Bitcoin business or whatever it may be, or Internet 3.0 built on top of Bitcoin. Like,
right.
you could do that as an investment. And like, then since you're on a sound money standard, you want to understand the risk returns of using that sound money for how them to generate more Bitcoin and
Right.
return to you and so on.
Well, yeah, and having a more valuable, yeah, exactly, like having a currency that people actually like really value. With fiat currency, what's the point of keeping it? Like, I might as well invest it or spend it today, because that thing that I want tomorrow could be more expensive. So I might as well buy it now.
Yeah.
Having a currency that doesn't do that, it totally changes the way that you think about it. Think about money. It's like, do I really want to spend my money on this MLM, or do I really want to invest in this other thing? Because I could be losing out on a real opportunity by not having this money, So
Yeah. So I guess what was your other investing mistake? I know that was a long rant by both of us.
yeah, no, that's good. So my other investing mistake, and this is something I probably will eventually get into, but have you ever heard of infinite banking?
No, I'm not. I've maybe heard of it, but I'm unfamiliar about it.
Yeah. So the infinite banking concept is another way of sort of structuring your savings to kind of be your own bank. And there are there are life insurance companies that are set up specifically to do this for you. Um, the I can actually, if you're interested in talking to them, I can just give you their name. I don't get any credit or anything, but the people that I worked with they're called Living Wealth, and they're based out of, I think, Kansas City, either Missouri. I don't know which side, I guess Missouri or Kansas. And what infinite banking is it's sort of uh, it's based on the guarantee that everybody is going to die. And what you do with infinite banking is you take out a policy, and you use that policy as your place to store short-term or long-term savings, however you want to structure it. And
Oh, isn't this what high net worth individuals do? I
yes,
think.
yes. So, and that was really my mistake. Is I got into it because I was very excited to get started in doing something like this. It wasn't like a Wall Street investment type of thing. It's basically, um, this isn't investment advice, but at a certain level, it's basically guaranteed growth. I mean, these policies have guaranteed rate of growth, and then they have growth on top of that as well. And if you if you're making, I want to say, like, I talked to my financial advisor, and he recommend, I need to be making at least like $400,000 for it before it actually makes sense. And so I got into this policy, um, and it was growing fine, but it wasn't growing to the extent that it could be in other places, essentially. So it's sort of like one of those things where it's like, do you want to pay off your mortgage, or do you want to invest in something that will grow faster than the interest on the mortgage?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
yeah. So it's like, if you're high net worth, the infinite banking makes more sense. But I would really recommend looking into it. There's a great book, which is basically the Bible of infinite banking. The guy who sort of started the whole infinite banking movement, um, Nelson Nash, and the book is called Becoming Your Own Banker, I think.
Hmm.
I just looked it up. Yeah, and it's by Nelson Nash. Yep. And it's a short read. It's short. It's pretty short and simple, and um, it's it's a it's a at least right now, tax-free way to build some wealth. So
Yeah, and I think that's another thing. I mean, that's how the ultra wealthy, and I even consider. I think I've heard of people of 25 million or more using that, but I've heard. I think if you have at least a 5 million net worth or 4 million, they
yeah,
can. That's kind of like the beginning spot
right.
where basically,
Where
like
it
you
kind of
said,
makes sense.
your investments are growing faster than the withdrawal that you're taking out on it.
Yeah,
So if you're only taking 4% out of 5 million, I can't do the quick math. That would be 200,000. Is that
yeah,
right?
I think so.
Two
Yeah,
hundred thousand dollars. So, but if you're getting higher than a 4% return on that money, then in theory, your 4% next year could be 208, no, 212, whatever it may be, and you're beating the hurdle rate of inflation or whatever it may be
yeah,
based on the difference of and it basically like you could live for forever on that, by
right.
doing that.
Yeah, yep. So that was my mistake, and that was more of a, there were, I guess, there were guarantees that I really liked about it, so it didn't seem super risky. But when it came into the whole picture, it didn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. All right. So, what's your favorite book, podcast, YouTube channel, website that you like to go to for investing information or Bitcoin?
Yep.
I won't let you say your own website because I'll save that for the end. But
Well, so and using my website, I'd be cheating, because whole Bitcoin is essentially a curation of tons of some of the best Bitcoin content that we can find. I
yeah,
mean, I wrote a couple of original articles, but really the meat, the substantive stuff is other people. So I can't even take credit. So My favorite podcast for from sort of the investing and macro perspective is um, We Study Billionaires.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yep, the Investors Podcast Network. So Preston Pish has an episode specifically on Bitcoin every Wednesday, and all of their content outside of those Bitcoin episodes is really good too. But I would really recommend listening to Preston's take
Yeah,
on it.
I agree. That's really what got me into it as well. So, Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. If
Yeah,
someone wants to learn more about you and Hold Bitcoin or your business or anything, this is your time to say where they can find you.
yeah. So okay, so this is where I kind of want to make a call for anybody who is passionate about Bitcoin and wants to have a sort of an outlet to grow the conviction of people around the world. Reach out to me. I'm looking for people to help with really anything. Like I have other things going on, so being able to focus on whole Bitcoin is not something that I have. I don't have that ability right now, 100%. So reach out, shoot me an email at info@holdbitcoin.org. You can also find me on Twitter. I don't really get on there very much anymore. I tried to build a following, but I found that I wasted more time than anything. But you can shoot me a DM on there. I am at HLDBTC. And then, of course, the website, if you want to check it out, or if you ever have a place where, maybe you want to just like drop, drop a hint, send them the domain holdbitcoin.org. And I specifically did hold instead of hodl because I didn't want to confuse or, alienate. Hodl is definitely more of a Maximus term. So hold Bitcoin because that's a good way for people who know nothing about it to get introduced to it. So yeah, if you're interested in helping out, definitely reach out. If you want to run the Twitter account, heck, let's talk about it. Or if you want to help curate content or work on the website, I'm totally open to that too. Whatever you, however you think you can contribute. So
Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and it looks like it was a good long episode too, about an hour and a half. So
yeah,
had
yeah,
a really good
absolutely.
time. So as always, everyone, like, comment, subscribe. You can go to the amateurinvestors.squarespace.com. You know where to find us, mainly on Twitter, but TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. So have a good one, everyone. Catch you later.